I just wanted to cry when I saw all of your faces. I can't even tell you how beautiful you all look. And just, I see all of these people who come from all different parts of my life. I see students who I currently have in my classes, and I see people I went to grade school with. I see professors from the University of Nebraska, and I see people I went to my PhD program with. I have people that I went to college with and students who were a part of my life and have gone on. And then lots of current people who live here in Logan as well. I just am so honored, so honored. My friends Tammy and Ann sent me this lei from Hawaii. And I wish you, for those of you that have never lived in Hawaii and been to Hawaii, leis are given so generously and so freely for all occasions. And you always give a lei by putting it around the person's neck and giving them a kiss and a hug. And you do it even if you don't know the person very well. And they're meant for hellos and goodbyes and for birthdays and celebrations. And it's just like you live your life amid flowers. It's really remarkable. And to have this from Hawaii is so special to me. So a special thank you to Anne and to Tammy. And I just want to say, I know this is going to sound corny, but you guys all look like flowers. I just see your faces and I've got this field of flowers in front of me. I'm sorry, but it's true. So I am going to read tonight from a collection that was just published, as Willy said. It's called Sky Songs. And these essays move across the last 16 years. They begin actually with the conception of my first son, Aiden, and then the arrival of my second son, Kellen, and go all the way till fairly recently. And I'm going to read an essay that comes late in the collection. It's called The Wanting Creature. And this is an essay about a time when Michael, my husband, and I were with our boys in India. So at the time of this piece, the boys are 8 and 10, okay? The Wanting Creature. We left for the Dalai Lama's temple a little after 6 in the morning. Clouds snagged the tops of the Himalayas, still snow-covered even in June. In the plum trees, bulbuls sounded their alarms, long cries that woke us each morning just as the skies began to lighten and did not cease until nightfall. Aiden and Kellen greeted the cow tethered in the neighbor's yard, as well as the random stray dogs they had named and now loved. I helped them tally the number of banana slugs we found to keep their minds off the earliness of the hour and the steepness of the slope. My parents had just recently joined us in India a little over a month into our 3-month stay. They shook their heads each time we climbed the grassy hill to the road where we would then face a longer and steeper ascent to town. Is up the only option, they joked. We joined the maroon-robed monks who walked the pilgrim's trail singly and in pairs. Pilgrims, many of them wearing traditional Tibetan clothes, accompanied them. All carried mala beads in their hands, most of them chanting just above a whisper, Om Mane Padme Om. Prayer flags dressed the pines in color. The monks must have cleared the forest of monkeys for His Holiness's presence, I said to Michael and smiled. We didn't see a single macaque. Even the cows had remained home, which left the woods to the crows and the supplicants. As we drew closer to the temple complex, the prayer wheels appeared. Over 300 lined the path. We spun everyone, chanting as we moved up the hill, acknowledging the divine in everything. The wooden handles were smoothed and softened by the thousands of hands that had touched them before. The wheels spun easily. Bright bell, green cedars, another prayer. At the Martyrs Plaza, Tibetans chanted with monks in long rows on the ground. Their words trailed the incense sweet and thick that lifted into the morning sky. We walked past the pictures of the martyrs, the young monks who self-immolated in protest of China's occupation of Tibet. It would have been easier to keep my head down, to avoid the wall of photos altogether, but I slowed, looked at each of the 50 or so faces, most of them smiling, some of them already aflame. The chants reverberated in my chest, all those low murmurs, the quiet urgency, something stirring deep and strong. We gave money every time we walked to town, gave money to the sadhus who sat in the woods in their orange robes and cooked meals from a single pot, gave to the thin man scarred from flame, gave to the old woman who had lost much of her face to leprosy and who cut the coins in blood-bandaged hands, gave to the children who reached out from their mother's arms, gave to the bent men who pulled themselves up the hill on wooden blocks or wheeled planks, gave to anyone and everyone who asked. Such actions, though, seemed flimsy at best, a coin here, a coin there, in the face of all that suffering. I was realizing that your presence, your ability to be present, mattered more. Moving toward rather than away, taking those bandaged hands in your own, carrying the backpack for the man with no legs, smiling at the woman who begs for her children. With that in mind, I looked into the eyes of the martyrs, wished them freedom from suffering, tried to be fully there. That focus, though, that presence, vanished as soon as we turned the corner at the top of the hill and arrived at the gate leading to the Dalai Lama's temple. A line of hundreds stretched down the street filled with Westerners, most of them young, who stood in clumps and shifted from leg to leg, eating bananas and drinking chai and laughing under the sun. We weren't the only ones hoping to see the Dalai Lama. Every few minutes the line moved forward, but mostly we stood. We should have left earlier, I complained to Michael, or taken the road instead of the pilgrim's path. We could have done the prayer wheels another day. It will be okay, he responded, and returned to the hand games he was playing with the boys. I simmered in silence and counted the number of people in front of us. Nearby, a couple was buying thin white cloths from a woman at a stall. The woman demonstrated for the couple how to hold the scarf across your hands like an offering. After they left, I went over and asked what the white scarves were for. For His Holiness to bless. How much are they? 20 rupees. 2 minutes later, we had 6 scarves. I knew, given the line, that there would be hundreds of people in the audience. I envisioned as I stood outside the temple that His Holiness would give a kind of global blessing, and we would all hold up our scarves. The blessing would filter through the air, lodge in the fibers, and we could hang that white cloth on our walls at home, point to it when guests came over. Excuse me, a woman, possibly French, asked, do you think we will be close enough to His Holiness to receive a blessing? I just saw someone else buying the scarves, so we bought them, I shrugged. Better to be safe, she said. I realized then that for the blessing to count, we would have to move close enough to have His Holiness actually touch it. Silently, I considered our relative position in line. Maybe an hour or so later, we made it through security and were released into the central courtyard. It felt good to be out of line, like we were making progress. The courtyard was a large square area shaded by white tents and tall, leafy trees. Even though I'd been expecting chairs instead of ground, there did seem to be space for everyone to sit. People dropped to the grass or to the stone slabs. Many leaned against the railings. We took places near the front, not far from where it looked like His Holiness would speak. Because we had arrived relatively early and because the courtyard was so large, we easily found places close to what appeared to be a stage. We sat on a low stone wall and waited. A woman nearby turned to us. If you can find a place on the railing, His Holiness will probably bless your boys. He loves children. I immediately scoped out the railing, looking for empty space. Behind us, people entered the courtyard by the scores, having made it through security. Within minutes, every low wall had been taken, every patch of grass was gone. I saw a space still free on the railing, close to the home of His Holiness. I took the boys and we wedged ourselves between the other Westerners. Michael and my parents remained where they had been. Soon, I lost sight of them in the crowds. Okay, I said to Aiden and Kellen, be ready for when he comes out. You'll want to lean over with your scarves, really stretch. The boys practiced. I made sure to keep claiming enough space along the railing, wide-legged and solid. A group of young monks not much older than my sons, arrived in a group and stood below us. How can I reach over them, Kellen wailed. I can't reach. I tried not to be angry at the monks. They were monks after all and young, but they had jeopardized my plan. Then it occurred to me that maybe we could use the monks. Surely the Dalai Lama would want to come over and bless these young men in service to the Buddha. Maybe we could leverage their position. I'll boost you up, I said to Kellen. I'll never reach, she cried. Well, it'll be okay if he doesn't actually bless your scarf. He has a lot of people to see. No, he asserted, it won't. He has to bless it. That's the whole point. Half an hour later, I was still at work holding our space on the rail. I had to fight off a Tibetan woman and then a young man who didn't speak English. I stared at the gates to the Dalai Lama's home, willing him to come out before we lost our good position. While I was at it, I willed him to move to his right first. Surely he will move to the right. I glanced about for the 100th time, trying to determine if there was a better place and feeling bitterness at all those who took up too much room. Suddenly an announcement. We need everyone to organize into groups based on nationalities, the voice said. His Holiness will take a picture with each group. If you're from South America, you need to be over here, Central America over here. I lost the rest of what he was saying, but the realization that all my maneuvering at the railing was for naught. All that standing, guarding, practicing, all that guessing, willing, plotting, in vain. I gave up my claim on the rail, watched the monks leave for their appointed place. The Americans made their way over to their section of the courtyard, more Americans by far than we had seen since leaving the United States. People started forming a line where it appeared His Holiness might walk through. Quick, I said to Aidan, pushing him forward, get up there. The boys stood at the front, but just as quickly a guard came by and told us to move to a different area. With each new space, I pushed and pulled the boys to the front. Here, I said, you can hold up your scarf this way. Here, I said, he will surely see you. After 4 hours, that would be 4 hours after we set out from our home, His Holiness walked through the gates. By then, I was exhausted. The panic I had carried for the last several hours, how will I get them close to the Dalai Lama, had worn me down. I sat on the ground, ready to go home. Before coming to India, I had not specifically wanted to see the Dalai Lama. Before hearing he was giving a public audience for foreigners, I had not wanted to listen to him talk. Before learning about the white scarves, I hadn't wanted to own one. Before realizing the possibility of a blessing, I hadn't needed one. Yet there I was in a crowd of Buddhists, no less, angling for the best space, planning, devising, pushing, needing, wanting. Worse, I had made the boys want the same thing. I'll never have a blessing, Kellen cried at one point, somewhere deep into the 4 hours of waiting. He had left without breakfast, we hadn't taken water, there were no chairs. Yes, you will, I insisted. Michael, though, picked him up. He has already blessed us, Kellen. He already has. Poppycock, I thought. I want that blessed scarf. My entire morning with the Dalai Lama was spent wanting. Things I hadn't known existed at 6 a.m. suddenly became centrally important by noon, and I gave so much energy to that wanting, allowed it to determine my experience at the temple. I didn't hear a word of his talk, didn't interact with the people around me, couldn't tell you the kinds of trees that grow in the courtyard. As it turned out, the boys were at the front and center of the picture with the Dalai Lama. His Holiness touched both of them. Through no effort of my own, they stood next to him. I, on the other hand, wasn't even in the picture, which I find perfect since I was never fully at the temple. The following morning, I thought about my derailed visit as I ran up through town and then along a mountain road. Between the cedars and the pines, I caught glimpses of the Himalayan peaks. The morning sun tossed crowns of light into the sky, and the snow shone bright like glass. In India, I ran early before the vendors opened for the day, but before the streets became clogged with people, cars, and dogs. And that morning, only my wanting creature accompanied me in the woods. My thoughts turned to home, to northern Utah in June, when the yellow mule deers carpet the mountains and the hillsides are green and bright. I love living in the tiny town of Logan for so many reasons. The mountains, the rivers, the canopy of sky. But that morning, I thought mostly about all that Logan didn't have. A Banana Republic, a Target, an Apple store. Instead, we had Old Navy. That was it. Such lack of retail options kept my wanting creature in check. I didn't want because there was nothing to want. Like an alcoholic who never brings alcohol into the house, I was fine as long as I never opened a catalog. But my wanting creature only bided his time, waited. In India, my privilege was so easy to see. I only needed to leave the house and my gross good fortune became clear. Too often, though, I measured my wealth materially. I had a good job, a retirement, a house, 2 cars, while those on the streets had much less. My own lack hadn't occurred to me amid all that poverty. I realized as I ran that morning that the trick was not in remaining present in the face of others' needs. It was remaining present in the face of my own wanting. As I came down the mountain from my run, I noticed that a group had formed outside the entrance to the Dalai Lama's temple. Since it was only 6 in the morning, only a few had gathered. At first, I thought His Holiness might be giving a second audience. As I got closer, though, I realized the people weren't queued as much as clustered. What's happening? I asked a Tibetan woman. His Holiness is about to depart. I found a place along the street and sat down to wait. I wondered what about might mean. 4 hours? How would I let Michael know that I was sitting on the roadside waiting for the Dalai Lama? Memories of the day before washed over me, feelings of frustration, emptiness, and loss. I didn't want to derail another morning. And then I wondered if I even needed to sit there, if I wanted to sit there, and why I might remain. Above me, the trees waved against the sky. Another beautiful day. Monkeys jumped from limb to limb. Near me, 2 men unfolded their white scarves, holding them as an offering across their hands. I thought of Michael and the boys waiting for me at home, of the man with no legs who greeted me every morning with a wide smile, his hands folded to his chest, of the morning sun on the snow. I realized it was really fine if I missed the Dalai Lama. My day would be full. I could simply walk back home. I started to rise, to leave, when the police cars drove past, lights flashing. Then several dark sedans, monks sitting in the back seat with their arms folded in their laps. Then the car with the Dalai Lama. We all bowed at the waist, hands in prayer. Some of the women prostrated themselves on the ground. His car neared me, and I looked up into his eyes as he passed. He smiled, maybe at me, maybe at the woman next to me, maybe at a shadow in the glass. Regardless, the grace went straight to my heart. I felt its warmth lodge in my chest. There on the streets, still in my running clothes, sweat drying on my skin, arms brushing against the woman next to me, I wasn't given anything I didn't already have. And I have this to share with you. Let's see. There we go. Thanks, you guys.